Hi everyone, welcome to Mr. Adams Teaches The Great Gatsby. In this video, we are going to be having an in-depth look at chapter 1, analysing character and theme. If you haven't read the chapter yet, please do pause me and have a quick read through. If you'd like a little bit of support here, there is a chapter by chapter audio book on offer to you through my channel. Just go and have a little look at the playlist and you will find it there. There will be some spoilers in this, so do be prepared if you haven't read it already. But for now, let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a plot summary of chapter 1. We start off by meeting Nick Carraway. He's actually our narrator, so we have a first person narrator. And he starts off by telling us a little bit about himself and his kind of perspective on life, about how much he judges people or not. And in his story, he hints to something that happened the summer before, a story that involved a man called Great Gatsby. And he gives us this very kind of ambiguous hint that Gatsby turned out all right at the end. But at the same time, we get this idea that, yeah, Gatsby turned out all right at the end, but there's all sorts of other things going on that he was very, very unhappy with. He then starts to give us a little bit more detail about himself, his background, before moving to the sort of specifics of the summer before where this story began. He tells us about the setting of the story. So he has moved to New York and is renting a little cottage in West Egg. Now these are two land formations that are sort of oval shaped, which is why they're called eggs. And he's living on the West Egg side here, which is a slightly less fashionable place, but still with people with lots of money, because this is where Gatsby lives, and we get description of his vast mansion. But then he also talks about East Egg on the other side, which is the more fashionable place, and symbolises old money, which is where his friends, or I should say his cousin, Daisy, and her husband, Tom Buchanan, live. And the story begins with the night that he went over to their place for dinner. So here we have, as presented in the Baz Luhrmann film, Tom Buchanan and his wife Daisy, Nick's cousin, and another character called Jordan Baker there in the background, who is a potential love interest for Nick. So Nick goes round to their beautiful home and has a very awkward evening with them, full of kind of phatic chat, where we get to see Tom in his element, his big hulking element, not particularly intelligent, quite racist. So they're having this very kind of difficult conversations around the dinner table, which is made worse by the interruption of the telephone. And Jordan tells Nick, as the two of them scamper off to deal with his telephone, that he has a woman in the city and he is cheating on Daisy with this lady. Again, here is the representation of her from the Baz Luhrmann film, a lady called Myrtle. So obviously Nick is quite shocked by this. Jordan isn't. Jordan, in fact, thinks that everyone knows that it's just normal information that Tom Buchanan would be cheating on his wife. Nick and Daisy then go on to have a conversation where she sort of talks to him about how difficult life has been and how unhappy she is. She talks about her little girl, who we don't meet, but we hear a tiny little bit about her. And then at the end of the dinner party, Nick goes home a little bit weary, a little bit troubled. And when he gets back, he sees standing at the edge of a dock this man who he recognises must be Gatsby, because he's next to the house, and he wants to go and say hello to him, but feels that he can't, especially when he realises that Gatsby sort of stretched out his arm and he seems to be trembling, and he's looking out into the distance, looking at this green light, and that is where the chapter ends. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to look at some chunks of the chapter in a little bit more detail. We'll do a little bit of analysis and just explain the overall significance to the themes. So let's start with our narrator, Nick Carraway. So here are some of the things that he tells us about himself. He tells us, "I'm inclined to reserve all judgments, a habit that has opened up many curious natures. So it came about that in college I was unjustly accused of being a politician because I was privy to the secret griefs of wild, unknown men." Okay, Nick is very keen to tell his reader that he doesn't judge people, that he reserves judgment, and that means that people trust him, people tell him lots of things, people want him around. Now, it's a wonderful moment of irony, because in the beginning, even of this just very chapter, we can see that he does actually judge people. He may not act on those judgments, he may not criticize people, but do look out for all of the examples of where he quite clearly is judging them. Plenty of evidence with the way that he talks about Daisy and Tom. He also says this: when I came back from the East last autumn, I felt that I wanted the world to be in uniform and at a sort of moral attention forever. I wanted no more riotous excursions with privileged glimpses into the human heart. This is a wonderful bit of, well, it's a narrative hook really, because he's talking about how he feels post the summer. So whatever it is that happened in this previous time that he is writing his book about, it has this impact on him that he wants the world to be in uniform. Okay, so this metaphor of the world being in uniform suggests that he is craving order. And it's not just order and systems that he wants. He wants the world to be at a sort of moral attention. So standing to attention. So it's another kind of image of the soldier. It's another image of war. It's an extension of the metaphor, but it's standing to moral attention. So the suggestion here is that whatever has happened in this previous time in the summer has been perhaps immoral, has been chaotic, and it has left him wanting no more riotous excursions into the human heart. So he's been left feeling that he doesn't want, one, to connect with people, but two, he doesn't want to have to deal with other people's emotions. So whatever has happened to him, whatever this story is surrounding him and Gatsby and Daisy and Tom, has left him craving structure, order, and morality. So a massive narrative hook at that. We also learn a little bit about Nick as a soldier, because it's fitting that this soldier metaphor is used here, because he has actually been involved in the First World War. So he said, I participated in that delayed Teutonic migration known as the Great War. I enjoyed the counter raid so thoroughly that I came back restless. Instead of being the warm centre of the world, the Middle West now seemed like the ragged edge of the universe. So I decided to go east and learn the bond business. So this is helping us understand why Nick went off to New York and, you know, ended up in this situation. And it's really interesting contextually, because what Fitzgerald is hinting to here is a phenomenon that a lot of young people felt after they came back from the war, which was feeling that this restlessness and this idea about being lost and not having anything to hold on to anymore. And they were called the lost generation. So Nick definitely fits into that category, the lost generation, who are now sort of post-war seeking something to hold on to. And I think this metaphor is extraordinary. Instead of being the warm centre of the world, the Midwest now seemed like the ragged edge of the universe. This simile suggests that what once used to feel comforting and safe now feels like one step away from oblivion. The fact that the adjective ragged is used as well suggests that he's on like this crumbling precipice, desperate for something to hold on to, which is of course dreadfully ironic, because he then goes off to New York and then experiences this summer of chaos, which meant that he ended up again wanting order. So Nick seems to be moving from place to place, craving a kind of sense of order and structure, and not quite managing it. So quite a complicated character to be introduced to as our narrator. He's a first person narrator. We also have to question therefore the reliability of him, because we are getting a story very much from his perspective of the past, and we can already understand that it's going to be swayed in some way, or biased in some way. he tells us that the story, the story's name comes from this man, the Great Gatsby, who was all right at the end. And so we get this idea that he is, for some reason, writing this down to restore Gatsby in some way, to make him great once more. So we have to question aspects of Nick's reliability as a narrator. Moving on, a really, really important aspect of this book is setting and identity, because often Fitzgerald plays around with the setting, whether that be the homes, the houses, or the towns, to represent aspects of characters, personalities, and identities. And this is incredibly evident in the character of Gatsby. So this is a description of West Egg, which is where Nick lives and Gatsby lives, and this gives us a very specific and detailed description of Gatsby's home. So he says, I lived at West Egg, the less fashionable of the two, euphemism for new money, though this is a most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them. My house was at the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound, and squeezed between two huge places that rented for 12 or 15,000 a season. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard. It was a factual imitation of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy, with a tower on one side, spanking new under a thin beard of ivy, and a marble swimming pool, and more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. It was Gatsby's mansion. Okay, so what we have here is absolutely marvellous description. Let's start here. It was a colossal affair. Now, in some ways, this is almost a little bit of an oxymoron. Colossal means enormous, vast. And when you refer to something as an affair, it's a little bit flippant. It's a little bit sort of, yes, sweep it away. So the idea of it being a colossal affair sort of undermines the stature of the house. It's certainly that there does certainly sound like there's a little bit of judgment in here. Colossal as an adjective, again, sounds really showy. He says it was a factual imitation, a factual imitation. So a copy of something that is word for word. Okay, another oxymoron, factual, but imitation, of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy. So this house is trying to emulate the chateaux and the beautiful homes in places like France, Hotel de Ville in Normandy. But note as well this indefinite determiner here, some Hotel de Ville, is not even anyone in particular. It's just does it look French? Okay, that's good. So again, you've got this little idea about being sort of new money, trying to look the part. And so with the tower on one side, spanking new, under a thin beard of raw ivy. So lovely bit of metaphor there. Again, suggesting newness, again, suggesting youth, but it's all about reminding us that this is not something established. This represents new money. It represents Gatsby. And then if you look at the beautiful, just blunt declarative there, it was Gatsby's mansion. It may as well say it was Gatsby. Yeah, spanking new under a thin beard of raw ivy. What's interesting, though, is that when you then compare it to the description given of Tom Buchanan's place over on the fashionable side, East Egg. So note, we have white palaces of fashionable East Egg, so a bit of hyperbole there, or metaphor referring to them as palaces. They glitter along the water, so like they're jewels. There's sort of freshness and beauty of fashionable East Egg. And then what we have is Tom's home. This is again just a representation from the film. Their house was even more elaborate than I expected, a cheerful red and white Georgian colonial mansion overlooking the bay. The lawn started at the beach and ran towards the front door for a quarter of a mile, jumping over sundials and brick walls and burning gardens. Finally, when it reached the house, drifting up the side in bright vines, as though from the momentum of its run. Okay, so this house is not necessarily trying to be anything. It's still grand, it's still palatial, but it's cheerful as an adjective rather than colossal. The fact that it's a Georgian colonial mansion, these are homes, you can see the way that it's being presented here with the columns. It's a style of home that was quite popular in the sort of 19th century America. It feels quite rooted in America, and there's a sort of sense of how natural everything is. So the idea of the lawn running between the beach, jumping over sundials, so the lawn has been personified, and it sounds energetic and but free as well. And unlike Gatsby's thin beard of raw ivy, these homes have bright vines across their walls. So you've got this massive juxtaposition. Gatsby's house is kind of like glaringly out of place, overly big, and so obviously new and possibly not massively tasteful in all of its ways, whereas Tom Buchanan's house feels natural in its surroundings, is established. So here we have Fitzgerald using the houses to symbolise the differences between old money and new money, but also to represent characters themselves. Tom Buchanan has an ease about him, you'll see, whereas Gatsby, it's all about show. Let's talk about Tom Buchanan. Here's a lovely picture of him in his riding gear. Okay, so this is a description from Nick. Nick, remember, the person who reserves all judgment. He doesn't judge. Her husband, so Daisy's husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that ever played football at New Haven, a national figure in a way, one of those men who reached such an acute, limited excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savours of anticlimax. Oh, goodness me, that's a man who doesn't judge. Okay, so Tom Buchanan was obviously super powerful, super important back when he was at university at Yale, national figure in one way, and it was because of his sporting prowess. And what Nick is saying is that because he was so celebrated back then for his sporting prowess, that everything is a bit of a disappointment, particularly because there's not much more to him than his sporting ability, which is why he had an acute, limited excellence at 21. Oh, that is punchy. He also describes his physicality. He says 2 shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always leaning aggressively forward. Okay, so we've got someone who's physically big, physically kind of aggressive, arrogant in look. Not even the effeminate swank of his riding clothes, as demonstrated here, could hide the enormous power of that body. He seemed to fill those glistening boots until he strained the top lacing, and you could see a great pack of muscle shifting when his shoulder moved under his thin coat. So he is a big man, full of muscles, that almost like spills out of his clothes. But it's the next sentence that really tells us about him. He says, "It was a body capable of enormous leverage, a cruel body." That personification of Tom's body there is the most worrying. It is a warning for what this man could be like, could use that physicality for. It smacks of violence. And then further discussions of his aggressiveness. His speaking voice, a gruff, husky tenor, added to the impression of fractiousness he conveyed. There was a touch of paternal contempt in it, even towards people he liked, and there were men at New Haven who had hated his guts. He is a man that is used to getting his way. He has oodles of money. He is old money, although there are moments where he behaves in a way that you might associate with the stereotypical views of new money, particularly the way that he spends money. But what Nick is trying to get across to us the most is how dominant, how aggressive, how powerful this man is. As the dinner progresses, we can quite clearly see that as well as those things, he's also a very stupid man as well, but that doesn't stop someone from being dangerous. We also need to meet the other ladies, Daisy in particular. We'll look at Jordan probably in detail in another chapter. But before we look at their specific characters, I want to look at their introduction because it continues this idea of setting an identity. So we walked through a high hallway into a bright rosy coloured space, fragilely bound into the house by French windows at either end. So again, note colour symbolism here, the rosy coloured space, it's soft, it's warm. The windows were ajar and gleaming white against the fresh grass outside that seemed to grow a little way into the house. A breeze blew through the room, blew curtains in at one end and out the other like pale flags, twisting them up towards the frosted wedding cake of the ceiling, and then rippled over the wine-coloured rug, making a shadow on it, as wind does on the sea. Okay, so this room has this breeze floating through it. All of the curtains and the white curtains are sort of flapping. There's more reference to white where it talks about the light fixtures being like a frosted wedding cake of ceiling, so that kind of intricate art design. So again, we're being reminded of the beauty and the luxury of it all. But obviously wedding cakes, we kind of think about the ideas of love and romance as well, so it's all being quite idealized. The only completely stationary object in the room was an enormous couch on which two young women were buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon. They were both in white and their dresses were rippling and fluttering as if they had just been blown back in after a short flight around the house. Two women in white, so connoting innocence, youth, perhaps purity, and they're buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon. So they're sort of light. It's like they're floating. Obviously, we're talking about metaphor here, but they're floating. So this idea of them having sort of leverage, them being above, yet at the same time, they are part of an anchored balloon. So they are tethered in some way. And they're rippling and they're fluttering. So this is so symbolic. It's symbolic of their status in society. It's symbolic of their freedom as rich, women of their class. Yet it's also a reminder that despite their freedoms, despite the fact that they're certainly better off than women of lower classes, they are still anchored. And what anchors them? Men. Tom Buchanan. If you notice, I must have stood for a few moments listening to the whip and snap, lovely onomatopoeia, of the curtains and the groan of a picture on the wall. Then there was a boom as Tom Buchanan shut the rear windows and the court wind died out about the room. And the curtains and the rugs and the two young women ballooned slowly to the floor. So note this idea. You've got these two young women floating, serene, idyllic, they're all in white, they're fluttering, they're high up, they're free, and then Tom Buchanan closes those doors and windows. Note the onomatopoeia, the volume of his boom, and they come back down. So again, it's a reminder of his power and how they, or certainly Daisy, is tethered to him. And on that note, let's talk about Daisy. So when Nick says hello to her, the other girl, Daisy, because he was just talking about Jordan as before, made an attempt to rise. She leaned slightly forward with a conscientious expression. Then she laughed, an absurd, charming little laugh. And I laughed too and came forward into the room. Right. 3 little adjectives: absurd, charming, little. So Daisy is presented as fun, as sweet, as carefree, easy to laugh. She laughed again, as if he said something very witty, and held my hand for a moment, looking up into my face, promising that there was no one in the world she so much wanted to see, so she could make you feel so special. That was a way she had. She hinted in a murmur that the surname of the balancing girl was Baker. I've heard it said that Daisy's murmur was only to make people lean towards her, an irrelevant criticism that made it no less charming. That's the money. So Daisy, she's sweet, she's light, she's bright, she's all in white. But she has affectations. There are parts of her personality that she puts on. So part of her charm is something that she does deliberately. She deliberately lowers her voice so that people have to kind of come and listen closely to what she's saying. And now a description of her voice. Always look out for descriptions of Daisy's voice. I look back at my cousin who began to ask me questions in her low, thrilling voice. It was the kind of voice that the ear follows up and down as if each speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again. Okay, so analogy being used here, comparing Daisy's voice to music. We have references to the tonal quality. It's low and thrilling. It captures you. People want to listen to what she says. It makes it sound like everything she says is going to be wonderful. And it's not just her voice that's like this. Her face was sad and lovely with bright things in it, bright eyes and a bright, passionate mouth. Note all of that lovely repetition. Okay, so again, she's like this beacon of light. But there was an excitement in her voice, back to the voice, that men who had cared for her found difficult to forget. A singing compulsion, a whispered listen, a promise that she had done gay, exciting things just a while since, that there were gay, exciting things hovering in the next hour. Lovely bit of foreshadowing here, this idea that there's something hypnotic about Daisy that men cannot forget. We've got an extension of the metaphor about her voice being like music, a singing compulsion, for example. Daisy is being presented here as the absolute ideal sort of Southern belle of America. She's charming, she's sweet, she's pure, she's innocent, but underneath that, there is a little bit of falsity. There's this idea of her constructing who she is, constructing how she wants to be seen. And perhaps part of that is because she has to, because of the relationship that she has with her husband. During the awkward dinner party, Tom is called off by the butler because he needs to take a phone call, and Daisy promptly follows him into the house, leaving Jordan, Daisy's friend, and Nick alone at the dinner table. When Nick tries to make pleasant conversation with Jordan, Jordan shushes him because she wants to listen in. Okay. Now, when she talks to Nick about the fact that Tom's got some woman in New York, the implication being that it's the woman in New York that is phoning, she isn't Jordan, considering she's Daisy's best friend, she's incredibly blasé about this adultery, adding, she might have had the decency not to telephone him at dinner time. Don't you think? So this idea, it's almost like, well, yeah, of course he's got a mistress, but she should behave herself better, like etiquette. Don't phone at dinner time. Don't phone at a time when Daisy's going to kind of know. So there's a sort of normalizing of adultery happening at this table. When they're back, you can see Daisy, bless her, trying to sort of cover up in some way. It couldn't be helped, suggesting that this phone call was urgent. But if you look at the oxymoron here, tense gaiety, again, this is another moment of affectation where Daisy is putting on, she's actually putting on the happiness, but it belies this tension underneath. And as the dinner party continues and they try and get it back on track, the telephone rings again. This telephone becomes a symbol. Again, there are moments where the telephone interrupts at many, many times, not just in terms of the relationship between Tom and Daisy, but with Gatsby as well. And so the dinner party technically is ruined. If you look at the metaphor here, it's the broken fragments of the last 5 minutes at the table. So there's this idea that the ambience, that the atmosphere has been shattered. And the reason it is because of the fifth guest's shrill metallic urgency. What a spectacular metaphor. The fifth guest is obviously Myrtle, Tom's mistress. The shrill metallic urgency, it's the sound of that ringing, that abstract noun, urgency. It's Myrtle's urgency. It's her need for Tom that has become this fifth guest at the dinner table, something that for Jordan is totally commonplace. And if we think about Daisy and Daisy's life that she's living, there are clearly things that she has had to accept, that she has had to become accustomed to. That doesn't mean that she is happy about it. She takes Nick to one side and they're talking about her daughter and when she was born. And she says to Nick, well, she was less than an hour old and Tom was God knows where. So immediately we understand from that even when she was having her baby, their baby, she was aware that Tom was cheating on her. Tom was God knows where, i.e. who knows who he was with. I woke up out of the ether with an utterly abandoned feeling and asked the nurse right away if it was a boy or a girl. She told me it was a girl, and so I turned my head away and wept. All right, I said, I'm glad it's a girl and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. This is so important for understanding Daisy's character. She wakes up utterly abandoned. Okay, so she's had her baby, she's had ether, so she's come out of the stupor, and she feels utterly abandoned. That's because Tom was God knows where. And this feeling of abandonment leads her to ask the nurse whether it's a boy or a girl. It's the feeling of abandonment that makes her want to know, not just the joy of being a mum, because she wants to check. And when she finds out that it's a girl, she cries. And the reason she cries is because understanding that a girl will have to go through the same, that a girl will also feel that sense of abandonment in a way that a boy will not. And so all she can do is hope that she'll be a fool, which is the best a girl can be, a beautiful little fool. Daisy hopes that her daughter will be ignorant to the pain that is involved in being a woman in this kind of patriarchal structure. She wants her to be beautiful because she's not an idiot. She knows that actually that is going to give her daughter advantages just as it has her. But unlike her, Daisy is no fool. And that's part of her pain, is that she understands exactly what her relationship is with Tom. And it leads her to feel abandoned and probably exhausted. And all she can hope for her daughter in that moment is that she never feels that pain. And the only way that that can happen is by her being stupid, not by marrying a good man, by being stupid. Shortly after this, Nick goes home. There is a conversation that is had about Nick having a girlfriend back home. We'll talk about that in another video about Nick and his relationships. But when he does get back, he sees Gatsby for the first time. He assumes he's Gatsby because he's on his property. And he notices that he stood out in the dock and he thinks to himself, oh, well, I'll go and say hi. But he doesn't. He stops himself because he, as in Gatsby, gave a sudden intimation that he was content to be alone. He stretched out his arms towards the dark water in a curious way. And as far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. So just picture this as an image in your mind. You've got this man at the edge of a dock, stretching out his arms. Think about that as a symbol. What does that represent? It represents need. It represents desire. Yeah, it represents want. It represents envy, maybe. Yeah, and he's trembling. So again, there is a desperation here. There is a high emotion here. And when Nick looks seaward, he distinguishes nothing except a single green light, minute and far away. So Gatsby is stretching out his arm to a light. This means that it is a symbol of hope, that it is a symbol of wanting. The fact that it is green is really interesting. Green is the colour that we associate with envy, with jealousy. For example, the phrase green-eyed monster, coined by Shakespeare. And that could fit, that he's looking over to where Daisy lives with a kind of sense of desire. Green, historically, before it became a symbol of envy, actually used to be associated with hope from pastoral traditions, because green was the colour of nature and therefore of new life. So green used to be associated with hope. That works also, you know, that this light is a kind of source of hope for Gatsby, looking over the dock. Green is also associated with money in American culture, because their cash, their cash is green. And, we're talking about a man who is motivated by money, who is motivated by social climbing, by climbing the ladder. All very relevant. But there is no doubt that in this moment, that light symbolizes a dream, whether that dream is love, whether that dream is money, whether that dream is both, is for you to decide. But a dream it does represent. Just final thoughts on this. This chapter is huge. You might want to go back and look at different parts again. I've not covered everything because it would take us far too long, but I will come back to certain parts of it when I do theme-based videos to help with your revision. But I think what you do need to take away from this, if you take away anything at all, is that this chapter sets up character, sets up this idea of identity and the way that characters can shape the way that they want to be perceived. Nick has the advantage on this because he's writing the thing, isn't he? This is his book. He's writing The Great Gatsby. I know Fitzgerald is, but Fitzgerald is writing, but Nick is writing it, if you see what I mean. And we've got this very mysterious figure of Gatsby who we've not really met yet properly. We've heard about briefly, but already we know so much about him through the symbolism that Fitzgerald uses, the way that his home is described, and certainly this kind of desperate longing that is hinted to at the end of the chapter. This is about the American dream. Yeah, this is about the idea that people can achieve things, and that is certainly being set up in this first chapter. There's so much more to say, so you're just going to have to keep tuned for the next one. I will do a chapter 2 analysis, and again, please do look at the playlist with the chapter by chapter readings as well. That will help you out, hopefully from home as well. That's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Give me a shout if you've got any questions, just pop them in the comments. Otherwise, happy revising.